Good evening and welcome to episode 9 of the Duval Rundown show presented by Injury Care Centers. My name is Gus Logue. I'll be joined shortly by Hacker and Mia O'Brien. Hacker's on right now, actually, so we'll add him now, but we're just about to go over the Jaguars' 47-10 loss against the Buffalo Bills. It was the worst halftime deficit in franchise history, and it was likely one of the biggest losses, just period, in franchise history. So, Hacker, how you doing? What are your immediate reactions to the game?
I mean, Gus, I was 12 years old, December of 1995, when the Jaguars lost 44-0 to Detroit. And I think arguably you could say this performance was worse. This was a failure at every level. This was an embarrassment. Second year in a row, the defense has been flat out embarrassed on Monday Night Football. Last year was Jake Browning. This year, Josh Allen. That's at least better, but there are not words to describe how bad this was. This is a game that causes change very quickly for an organization. What Shad Khan must have been thinking watching this game tonight, it was bad. It was bad at every level. Complete failure.
Yeah, that was definitely on the back of my mind was Shad Khan's comments during the offseason about just how the team needs to win now. Just with all the investments he's made, not just around the team, like the stadium in the future, but also into the team directly with how much money he spends on just building a roster. The expectation for everyone in Jacksonville, but including Shad Khan, was for the team to win now. And so now the Jaguars are one of, I think, just 2 undefeated teams so far this season, going 3 weeks in, joining the Tennessee Titans. And so I was going to ask you, Hacker, like I know you brought up that Detroit game, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a worse game that I've remembered seeing. Can you think of like what the last bad game might have been? Maybe during the Urban Meyer era, but could go back even farther.
There were a ton of bad games. The Malarkey year was awful. The Urban year was awful. There was a Patriots game where I think New England won like 59-17 or something. I go back to 44-0. Minnesota in 98. Now, Mark Brunell was injured in that game. Jonathan Quinn played, and that was on a Sunday night too, I believe. And it was like 50-10 Minnesota. This will be in the conversation. I mean, you got the all-time dumpster fire games in Jaguar history. This is it. And all the talk about we know what we need to do. We suck right now. We're a ticked-off football team. That's just noise, man. It's nonsense. I said at the end of last year, when a team shows you who they are, believe them. And I believe the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. They're not any good. I was wrong. Heads are going to start rolling, I think, pretty quick because, Gus, look at all the money they spent, man. Hines Allen, Trevor, Oluwakin, Campbell on extensions. Then you go to Armstead, Savage, who's not even playing. Gabe Davis, Darby. I mean, millions and millions and millions of dollars. And this is what you get? This is what you get if I'm Shad Khan. I'm fuming now.
It's really just unacceptable.
Unacceptable. The best word of the night.
There you go. We've got Mia O'Brien, who's also going to be joining the show. We'll bring in Mia now because I want to hear her thoughts on just what the worst losses in your recent memory, Mia, and how this compares.
Yeah. I will not spoil tonight's quick hits driven by Arlington Toyota, but what I will simply tell you is I go back to that second week of January 2024 after the disappointing season-ending loss to the Titans, but before Doug Peterson dismissed his defensive coordinator and almost his entire defensive staff. He said in the press conference prior to that move that he knew the problems and he knew how to fix them. I'm not pegging this loss entirely on the defense. Without the defense, this Jaguars offense is largely not in either of their first 2 ball games. But I cannot come away from the first 3 games of this season and say, did he actually know the problems and did he actually address them? Because there are still lots of problems, and many of them are the same problems we saw down the home stretch, if not earlier in the 2023 season.
Yeah, to dig into it, I feel like he was saying that the problems that he was able to see from last season were kind of like scheme or on-field related in terms of like, oh, we were missing these players because of injuries or whatever, and these players can step up their games in these ways, and we as coaches can maybe tweak a few things to just get our players in better places to succeed. And so I feel like the Jaguars, even if they haven't done a good job of that this season, I've seen them at least try to change in that regard. But in terms of like the off the field thing, I feel like that's where the biggest issues lies. That there's just no motivation with this team. We've seen it week after week so far this season. There's just no juice on the sidelines. There's no juice from the head coach. There's some juice from the quarterback who's paid $275 million this offseason to stay in town for another 6 years, so people can quiet down a little bit about trading him or getting rid of him.
Yeah, also, I would like to briefly say, Gus, for all of those who have called into 1010XL, for all of those who have commented and tweeted at us and said, just put Mac Jones in. Well, you put Mac Jones in, not really all that different. So if anything, it may have been worse. And that was against the Bills defense that was at that point had this game in the bag. Look, as much as I led my opening statement by referencing Doug Peterson and the defense, and certainly I, of anyone, have been extremely critical of Press Taylor and whoever is calling plays, which ultimately, since I don't think we will have any clarity on that anytime soon, this falls at the feet of Doug Peterson. But again, it's the offensive operation that at the very least, I was optimistic at the end of last year that we did know that it was 100% Press Taylor calling the plays last season, especially down the home stretch. And so hearing Doug say, I know the problems and I know how to fix them, said, I'm either going to take the play calling back or the offense will have my fingerprints over it 10 times over comparatively last year. And if Doug Peterson is the offensive wizard that so many in the National Football League believe him to be, then, well, either he didn't change anything or something else has changed, which to me, yes, I will say it, since several people on Twitter have asked, I will say you did not see players responding to coaching this evening. You did not see players who looked like they were playing for a coach or playing for a cause outside of, as Gus mentioned, Trevor Lawrence, the only one really trying to bring juice along the sideline, arguably for a second straight week. And so, yes, the question inherently has to be, where do you create the spark? Because you can't wait for it. Trevor said it last week. They've been saying that since they never got a spark at the end of last year. And is that spark to let heads roll, to bench players, to bring in a new coaching staff and fire Doug Peterson midseason? In my estimation, at this juncture, if you're to see a similar performance next week, it has to be a conversation if it's not already.
Well, one of the problems too, guys, really quick, is when all of us on 1010XL and Jaguar fans that listen to us every day talked about the offensive line and the pass rush, right? And we've talked about the pass rush for 2 years. Trayvon Walker and Joshua Hines-Allen are good. They have nothing behind them. They didn't have anything behind them last year. And I don't know if it's stubbornness. I don't know if it's arrogance, or I don't know if it's incompetence at this point. Josh Allen, the Buffalo Josh Allen, the one that torched you for 1 billion points tonight, I don't know if he got touched behind the line of scrimmage this evening. And as far as the offensive line goes, again, we were concerned about that. And if we're concerned about it on the radio, how did they not know that that might be an issue the entire offseason? And all you do is bring in 32-year-old Mitch Morse. That was your only cause of action. And
it was arguably the best offensive lineman tonight for a third straight week, by the way.
In this whole season.
Bring a fourth-rounder in Javon Foster, who's going to be inactive every game this year. That is, again, either arrogance, stupidity. I don't know what it is. And I shame on me, because I defended Trent Baalke. I thought Baalke had a very good offseason. But that pass rush and that offensive line are horrible. And we all had questions about them coming into this year.
Not that I want to provide levity and a laugh, but I think it's needed. As you guys keep the comments coming on X, Facebook, YouTube, we appreciate all of you for tuning into this Duval Rundown Instant Reaction podcast. Is it that Dewey Wingard's not there? Like, is the spiritual leader missing? Like, I mean, at this point in time, like, it's not even a bit, you know. Like, I mean, I'm saying it to try to give you all at least a little bit of a chuckle. But honestly, like Gus said, who else is bringing the juice? The quarterback's trying, and the quarterback calling everybody out last week, and including holding himself accountable. Look, he was not perfect. He was not good tonight at many stretches of the ball game, despite Dan Orlovsky trying his best efforts to paint a rosy picture. But he is far from enough with the generational debate, people. He is far from the biggest problem right now, because even when he has two defenders in his face and he's throwing off his back foot, he's still landing the ball in the back corner of the end zone, and it's bouncing off Christian Kirk's helmet.
Yeah, that's another.
Those are throws that no one, like, there's very few human beings who can physically make that throw. And the fact that we are now in year 4 and he is not making that throw for a touchdown to secure a 3-score lead is an indictment on the entire organization, not just the player. It is the organization failing to develop the player.
While we're on the talking point of Trevor, I also feel like all of his misses this season, not just tonight, but like just all of his bad throws and bad decisions have been just a lack of confidence, and not just in himself or his teammates, but it feels like mostly the scheme in the offense. Because like last week against the Browns, there was multiple times in the red zone where the Jags actually schemed up a pretty solid underneath look, but Trevor got off of it like super quickly because he felt incoming rush. So he also really doesn't trust his offensive line either. And so, like, obviously the miss to Brian Thomas Jr. over the middle of the field on play action in the first half was clearly a miss when Damar Hamlin it's going to make a joke, but I'll pass. When Damar Hamlin...
There's enough of them online. If you're looking for them, folks, just scroll the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. But that's one where it's like, I feel like Trevor Lawrence has especially looked uncomfortable under play action, because he's been pretty efficient in his career under play action so far. But like with the rate that the Jaguars are running it, I think he's uncomfortable, partly because going back to his college and career days, he was always in a shotgun-based offense. And so that's what I was advocating for going into this week, was to let Trevor cook on early downs, not just by throwing it, because the Jags did that, but by like just getting the ball out quickly, like we saw a lot last year, even when the offense was kind of impaired by injuries. And now I feel like they're just putting the just hard mode on for Trevor for no reason, really. And even though, like, sure, play action passes are typically more efficient than non-play action passes, it has to get set up by something more efficient than Travis Etienne getting 3 or 4 yards of carry. And so I still believe that Trevor Lawrence can be the guy, and is just not being helped out by his environment.
Well, and look, you know, we're going to have all week to break down the X's and the O's, and good for me, I get to go do the 5th quarter on 1010XL coming up here with Coach and Leon, and that'll be stimulating from about 12:30 to about 2:30. This is football hell in North Florida right now, all right? The Jaguars are awful, and we have 14 games to go. Florida's going to fire Billy Napier any day of the week, and Florida State is celebrating like they won the Super Bowl with a 14-9 victory over the Cal Golden Bears on Saturday night. So if you're a Seminole, if you're a Gator, or if you're a Jaguar, this is football hell, and it's September. And we have, for the Jaguars, 3.5 more months of this. For the life of me, I don't know how you come back from something like this, particularly you're going to play Houston next week. Houston got embarrassed yesterday. They're going to smell blood in the water. The Jaguars are going to be staring 0-4 in the face, and I tend to agree with Mia. If they go out next week and have anything that resembles what happened tonight, I think Monday could be a very interesting day at the Miller Electric Center, because Shad Khan's getting kind of humiliated on social media right now, because Pro Football Talk and all these national websites got a hold of what he said about this is the most talented team ever. And that's making all the rounds now, and he's kind of a brunt of some jokes, and it's just a horrible situation all the way around.
Yeah, we have not gotten the schedule yet. For those of you asking who will ask Doug Peterson the tough questions tomorrow, I am clearly not in Buffalo, if you couldn't tell. Rick Ballou is up there for us, so we will keep you posted as far as any quotes or anything notable that comes out of that press conference right now up in Orchard Park. We expect to have some sort of media availability potentially tomorrow or Wednesday. We'll see, with the team flying back late this evening, what exactly is in the cards. But no, I think the time has passed for this is execution, or this is on miscommunication, or, we're just not making the plays when we need to make the plays. Because if you've lost the fire in the belly that propelled you to the third largest comeback in NFL history less than 2 years ago, then you have lost the locker room. And that question needs to be asked right now, because now it's back-to-back games that you look up and down that sideline. And last week, somehow, some way, it was in a one-score ball game. You look up and down the sideline, and where is the leadership coming from? More so than that, and this isn't to critique the ESPN broadcast, which I thought was pretty good tonight, Dan Orlovsky and Louis Riddick kept asking, this team needs to find its identity. This team needs an identity. What is the Jaguars' identity? And I know you both are smiling, Gus and Hack, because we have debated that ad nauseum at 1010XL for the better part of the last year and a half. Even when this team was the Cardiac Cats of 2022, they didn't have an identity when it came to the actual structure of their offense. And Randy, that's a great question. I think you'll need to keep us posted on what's happening in the press conference, as we're live on the air right now. Thanks to our friends at Injury Care Center for powering our wonderful Duval Rundown instant reaction. But I do think that the idea of identity is something we talked about. And yes, TX, identity. Oh, yeah, they have an identity. Yeah, I know. Their identity right now is 0-3. You are what your record is. But again, that was always the question. Is it we are Trevor Lawrence, or we are a rushing attack, or we're going to beat you up, or we are a badass defense? They never answered the question of what their identity is. It didn't matter what free agents they brought in to patchwork this offseason. It didn't matter who they drafted outside of drafting Brian Thomas Jr. And if they'd gone wide receiver, and said, we're just going to be a track team out there. And even that, I don't think you can fix in an off season, and you certainly cannot fix this identity issue in less than a week's time when you have to go to Houston next week.
Yeah, it's funny because Doug has said during press conferences, he's talked about the need to kind of find his identity, or for the team to find their identity and get back to their identity. And at one presser, he was asked what his identity is as a football organization, and he just kind of chuckled in the way that he likes to do in pressers, and gave pretty much a non-answer about how they want to be a physical and smart football team, and all the coach speak that you'd hear any coach want to describe their own football team. And so it's disappointing to the way to hear Doug talk about how there's a lack of clarity kind of to the media in pressers. And it seems like maybe there's a little bit of a lack of clarity behind closed doors too. So, Hacker, I know you've got to get to fifth quarter. So before we let you go, I'll put you on the spot and ask for your prediction next week. Is it a ugly Jags win and there's a lot of action on Monday, as you mentioned earlier, or do you think there's actually a chance the Jags could maybe pull the biggest upset ever?
I mean, it's the NFL, so who really knows? Certainly the Jaguars can win, but I mean, it's a short week. You got utterly embarrassed in front of the entire country tonight, and you're going to Houston, and Houston's going to be licking their wounds from getting beat pretty handily by Minnesota next week. I mean, I'm not picking Jacksonville to win the game. It's not going to be as ugly as tonight, because what really can? Tonight was one of the ugliest performances in team history, certainly in the conversation. But in no way, shape, or form do I think Jacksonville has a chance of winning the game. And at that point, at 0-4, and being down basically 3 games to Houston in the division, at that point, I think heads might start being rolled a little bit. But, yeah, fifth quarter, come on and join us beginning at about 12:30. Leon Searcy's saucy, I can tell you that, and some text messages I got from him. Maybe not Coach Campo. Coach Campo said some really interesting things that I can't repeat right now, but just know this. 5 decades of football for Dave Campo. He said that first half performances are one of the worst he's ever seen. And we're going to get him to elaborate on that. And I'm going to ask Leon Searcy in the first 5 minutes to give me not only his thoughts, but his perspective on Cam Robinson's performance tonight, because it was one for the ages, brother. Let me tell you. So the fifth quarter will be a lot of fun. I'm going to listen to you guys as you guys continue to roll here. But, yeah, it should be a very interesting day tomorrow at 1010XL.
Yeah, make sure you guys definitely go check in the 5th quarter tonight with Hacker, Leon, and Coach Campo. And then obviously just check out all of our radio shows and social channels for your content tomorrow about the Jaguars and where they could go following this disastrous game in Buffalo. So, Hacker, thanks for joining us. We will see you next Sunday after the Texans game.
Have a great night, guys.
Let's hope when we have that instant reaction next week out at NRG Stadium when I join you guys from the field, maybe we have a little bit happier news. Probably not though at this current juncture. Gus, do we want to have a word from our sponsors? I'm ready for it if you want me to read through it.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, our thanks to Injury Care Centers. Your path to recovery starts here. We appreciate them for all that they do in getting us up and off the ground running here on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel. And of course, you can listen to our Instant Reaction podcast after each and every game, as well as Tuesdays and Thursdays with Gus Logue, myself on Thursdays. Tuesdays, a reoccurring cast of characters, which I am realizing we do need to confirm who the mystery guest is tomorrow. I'm very curious if anyone at 1010XL is going to want to join after this late night, Gus. Let's dive into some numbers because I don't really I don't really know what else we can do besides offer all of you out there on Facebook and on YouTube and on X a place where you can share your thoughts. We will react to them as well. But yeah, as far as the stats go, for me, the bugaboo continues to be, even if the team was 4 of 8 on 4th down, because they literally were in 4th down territory from the second quarter on. The Jacksonville Jaguars 2 of 13 on 3rd down tonight as those 3rd down woes continue up. Apparently the Bengals and the Commanders just went live. Thank you, Kevin Lowry. So the Bengals are 0-3 as well. There's now 3 0-3 teams in the National Football League. I believe that's now 3 teams that all struggle on 3rd down, and 2 of them have Taylor brothers on the coaching staff. Who would have thunk, Gus?
Who would have thunk? It really is a funny thing to see. I mean, we got a lot of comments. Louis, sorry that I didn't see your first one. We've got a lot of people here ranting about the Jags.
Yeah, over 200 of you guys listening live on YouTube right now. We appreciate it. And again, we are a spot for you. Wow. A round of applause, Gus Logue. We have over 1,300 of you on X alone. So please leave a comment. We will get to it. We will also, of course, let, again, our good friends at Injury Care Centers and, of course, at 1010XL know so many of you with something to say as the questions continue to grow here in Jacksonville as far as not only where this team is headed this year, but if a coaching change, if a complete sweep of the entire organization, a clean house, yes, T1CN is in the waking.
So one comment I wanted to talk about comes from Pressure Washing Pros on Facebook a few minutes ago. Said too much talent on this team. And I was just thinking when Hacker was talking about how there's no depth behind Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, that is absolutely true. Whether it is stubbornness or just blind belief that the talent behind those two is enough. It was a little bit absurd, and we all kind of knew it going into the season. And now at this point, it certainly hasn't paid dividends. I think the team is probably going to be one of the lower teams in terms of ranking of pressure rate and pass rush win rate and all that kind of stuff after this week. But I also think that Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker haven't quite done enough of themselves. One example is from tonight when we all saw Trayvon Walker not get called for a holding penalty, and I believe it was the first quarter when Buffalo was in the red zone on their second or third drive. And he kind of did a spin move and then got caught by the offensive lineman, and Josh Allen was able to escape around him. And I think that if Allen had remained in the pocket, it would have been a pretty obvious flag. But because Allen did escape the pocket, I kind of understand the refs for not really throwing it, because at that point, Walker just had his hands up and he was just watching Allen go by. And so, I understand that that's a tough call maybe, and that Trayvon clearly believed that he should have gotten the holding call. But, you got to finish plays. And for Josh, he's definitely an unsung player, even in this month, including against the run, which I feel like he's always been underrated for. But I feel like he really just takes advantage of weaker competition a lot of times, which helps to drive up his pressure numbers. And I would have liked to see the two of them finish on a few more plays. And I know that a big part of it for tonight, especially, is that the pass coverage did not hold up whatsoever, especially in the first half. With Ryan Nielsen continuing with his man coverage tendencies. Joe Brady and Josh Allen and the Bills offense just tore them apart.
Yeah, but here's the problem, Gus. Even if Trayvon gets called for that holding call, what, you lose 41-10 instead of 47-10? You know, like that's the reality of it. The reality is like, yes, could that have shifted momentum? I guess, but you want to know who else would have shifted momentum? If the team didn't allow the Bills to march up and down the field and have large chunk plays throughout. What did we hear from Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen from the moment those two arrived in Jacksonville? Nothing cheap and nothing deep. Well, there was a lot of intermediate, I guess, then. I guess that's not included when you say nothing cheap and nothing deep. And the Bills absolutely capitalized on it. You saw the Jags defense for the first time really go to zone a little bit more because obviously they knew there's always a threat that Josh Allen could use his legs. But even then, he is so cerebral as a quarterback that as soon as he did see them line up in man, he just split whatever defensive front you threw out there and ran for a pickup of 10 to 12 yards on multiple occasions. The Jaguars gave up multiple 3rd and longs, and it was a masterclass by Josh Allen. I do not think it's hyperbole to say it's one of the best games he's ever played, especially with the Jags with a makeshift secondary, yes, and their hockey shift rotation of a defense, which I don't know how much longer that will go on, but as of this juncture, that is the bag of goods that Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke were sold from Ryan Nielsen, and that's what they are going to follow until otherwise noted. Even if you account for all that, I just think it was truly a masterclass by Josh Allen. And he took advantage of a team that, yes, we're going to go back to it. They don't know who they are. What are the Jacksonville Jaguars at this current juncture?
Just a sour disappointment is how I would describe them. It's tough that it's so far into the season that it's feels over. And it's crazy that it is so far into the season that it feels over, especially when we saw such a big comeback 2 years ago in the middle of the season. And then even last year, like they went on a pretty impressive stretch of wins in the first half. And so we've seen this team like be able to rally a little bit and collect a few wins. But at this point, all hope just seems lost. And so I wanted to ask you more about Nielsen's approach. Like to me, I thought that they should have just gone zone heavy from the start, because even if Nielsen likes what he likes, a large reason the Jags were able to upset the Bills in the past 2 matchups were because Jacksonville kind of had a zone-heavy approach, especially zone-heavy relative to what they usually did during the season, and were able to just like muck up enough passing windows for Josh Allen to force him into enough incomplete passes and enough just bad passes to be able to eke out a win. And then tonight, like, he was able to get the ball out of his hands so quickly because, again, Joe Brady was able to scheme up a lot of stuff against man coverage, whether it was James Cook out of the backfield, Khalil Shakir in the slot, even Don Kincaid going deep against Antonio Johnson. I mean, that was a really pretty route by Johnson, but like the problem is that you don't have guys that can match up against these players. And I actually said on Duval Rundown last week, or actually, no, I said this on a Buffalo Bills podcast, actually, that I felt really good about Jacksonville's secondary matching up with the Bills pass catchers, just because they don't have a Stephon Diggs anymore. So even if they have good players like Kincaid and Shakir and their rookie Keon Coleman, and of course James Cook, there wasn't really anyone that like truly just struck fear into me as an opposing threat. But then like the Jags just really did not have enough horses to run man coverage against a really, really good quarterback, someone who's the front runner for MVP right now, and then a really, really good play designer in Joe Brady. And so it was just kind of a double whammy, because it was disappointing to see Jacksonville kind of being out-schemed a little bit on defense, especially with all the hype that Ryan Nielsen brought in this offseason. But it was doubly disappointing because I feel like Jags fans all over the place were probably watching Buffalo's offense all night thinking, why can't we do that?
Right. And that's Jaguars fans watching every offense that they have faced, including the anemic Cleveland Browns offense, because at the very least they have a capable play caller and play constructor in Kevin Stefanski. Here's the really sad part, Gus, and I quizzed our colleague Hayes Carlyon on this. Thank you, 100. I love the stitch, AVI. That's great. I quizzed our colleague Hayes Carlyon on the Terminex kickoff show earlier. In his last 12 games, how many 100-yard rushing games does James Cook have?
2.
1. Do you want to know how many rushing yards he had tonight? 11 carries for 39 yards.
Wow.
And Josh Allen had 6 carries for 44 yards, which certainly significantly more than last week against the Dolphins, in which he had 2 carries for 2 yards, slightly more than the 9 carries for 39 yards he had against the Arizona Cardinals. A lot of ways to skin a cat, and that is certainly the case when it comes to how Joe Brady employs his offense. But again, we talked about this last Thursday, Gus. James Cook is not out here grounding and pounding for 100-plus yards every time out. It's just quite simply that Joe Brady has recognized if you can create this idea of a threat on the ground to complement Josh Allen, to open up opportunities for him downfield, to open up opportunities for him to break free of the pocket, scramble, and pick up a first down. That changes the complexity of that offense entirely. You could say the same thing, although in a different light, for Isaiah Pacheco and the Kansas City Chiefs and what he has been able to do for them over the last 2.5 years. I think despite, win on Sunday night last night, I think you kind of saw it, nothing against Carson Steele, but the reality is when you have that quote unquote threat to run out of the backfield who can bully you. Again, I don't think Isaiah Pacheco has eye-popping numbers either, but simply if there is someone besides these generational quarterbacks, because guess what? I'm going to call Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes generational quarterbacks. How does that feel, Jacksonville? Then that changes everything. And so that is where I can't even put this on, they let the Bills run all over them. They only gave up 123 yards. They only gave up a 4.2 yard per carry average. It's just that they allowed them to matriculate up and down the field and put together these 8, 9, 10 play drives. That's the part that I did not see coming from this defense. And it's a defense that kept them in ball games the first 2 weeks of the season. I'm curious if they facing a pretty, let's call it I won't say a triple-headed monster, but a heralded offense nonetheless next week in Houston that has 3 prolific wide receivers, even if they haven't really showed it over the last few weeks. I am curious if Ryan Nielsen will go back to more of that press man coverage because CJ Stroud isn't as much of a threat to run as Josh Allen.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head just now when you said just all of the 8-play, 9-play, and 10-play drives. We saw that a lot last week against Cleveland too. It's just infuriating to watch a team slowly trickle down the field, and then the Jags will get maybe 1 first down and punt, and all of a sudden Jacksonville's defense is back on the field. That's what it's felt like for definitely the past 2 weeks, but pretty much the whole season. And so, Nielsen, as you said earlier, his kind of motto for the defense is nothing cheap, nothing deep. And I feel like he's a little bit too focused on the nothing deep because Jacksonville has let up a fair share of explosive plays, but really other than the Tyreek big play and then Jalen Waddle big play, I can't think of another play that was over 40 or 35 yards. And so I think he's going a little bit too high with his safety shell defense where he has mostly 2 safeties, but at least 1 safety back there to help prevent all those deep plays. But I think he needs to start taking a little bit more risks, especially on money downs, but also on early downs, and try to mix up a little bit more blitzes. I'm not sure exactly what Jacksonville's blitz rate is compared to the rest of the league through 3 weeks, but I would imagine it's average or maybe a little bit below average. But I think I said on Duval Rundown last week, I'll be interested to see how much cover 0 specifically Nielsen would have dialed up against Buffalo, which is always dangerous since if you leave everyone one-on-one against Josh Allen, then that's a big risk. But at the same time, it's a bigger risk for Josh Allen and the Bills too, because they have to get rid of the ball so quickly or it's going to be a sack. And so you have to start trying to find a way to create bad plays for the offense and especially just create turnovers because the Jaguars at this point have 0 turnovers through 4 games.
So the $1 million question is, Gus, and of course we have so much content still to come throughout the course of the week on 1010XL and here on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel as well. But the question becomes, can you turn this thing around in a week's time? We asked that question last week. How can you now turn around and maybe steal a game in Houston, or at the very least get this thing back on the tracks? Or in your estimation, is this just at this point in time, there's no getting the train back on?
At this point in time, I think there's no hope in getting the train back on. And I think a large part of it is because of the early opening schedule. Jacksonville had maybe the hardest start to the schedule in terms of the first month of the season for them compared to any other team. I feel like the Ravens have played a lot of other tough teams, but I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head.
I think they said on the ESPN broadcast, it said this was the first time in 5 years that a team has started its first 4 games against teams that were in the playoffs a year earlier.
There you go. And so if Jacksonville had a game next week against, I don't know, I was going to say the Commanders, but they did just beat the Bengals just now in the second leg of the Monday Night Football.
Maybe if they had to play the Bengals are 0-3. They're kind of searching for answers.
If they had kind of like a quote unquote get right game in front of them, then I would say maybe. But just because they have the Houston Texans in Houston with CJ Stroud, even though they lost against Minnesota, I still think that team is a true contender to win the Super Bowl and advance out of the AFC. And so it seems like an inevitable 0-4 start. And then like at that point, it's just going to be too little too late for anything that goes on after.
And like I said, like for me, this is not even about they're getting beat close by playoff teams from a year ago, and these games are competitive. Certainly, if only in the box score, the last 2 weeks were competitive. They came down to the final series of the game. It was a 1-score game. But I think that the cracks that have been simmering beneath the surface came to a head this evening. And that's where I have concerns, because once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't put it back in. And the same can be said for once that trust is lost. And I don't think you will ever have anyone on the record say that we don't believe and, there's not a chance. Because, again, this is the same team largely who came back from down 27-3 and who came back from a 3-7 record to make the postseason 2 years ago, even if they certainly had some help. And the fact that this team is largely comprised of the same gentlemen, both on the coaching staff and on the field, and you don't see that, like you don't see that will to win, that's where I just don't think you can create that or summon that from anywhere.
Absolutely. So you mentioned earlier that there could be changes coming soon, whether it's in the form of a firing of the coaching staff or if it's just someone getting benched from the roster, or like if/when a change comes, what do you think the first domino to fall will be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, again, like at the end of the day, if you're not going to tell us who's like I go back to 2018, Doug Marrone had the ultimate out to that offense's struggles. He simply said, well, it's Nate and it's Blake. And you can bench Blake and you can Nate Hackett, the offensive coordinator, and we'll blame the rest on injuries and we'll figure it out from there. Because we do not know who the play caller is, ultimately, Doug Peterson has said that all of this falls at his feet. And so to everyone saying it should be press first, I mean, Doug has said that this is his offense, though. And that's why he doesn't want there to be an argument of who the play caller is. And so in turn, it has to be the two of them. Sorry, Randy. The quarterback is the furthest person who's going to suffer any sort of repercussions from this. Not happening. And that's not me defending him. That is me defending a investment that Shad Khan made and take the football part out of it. This is just business, folks. If that's who you hitched your wagon to, he's going down with the ship, baby. The same cannot be said for Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, especially because if Doug is saying, well, this is my offense, so who cares who's calling the plays? Well, your offense is largely to blame for, if not the second half of Miami and the entire Browns game and whatever that was I just watched on Monday Night Football. You are the head honcho. So if, again, and we haven't heard anything concrete as to, is someone going to get canned, or like, is there going to be a scapegoat for all this? All I can tell you is that if Doug has consistently said that this is his team and his offense, then if everything is broken, wouldn't that be the logical first step? I know there are those of you that want Trent Baalke to be the sacrificial lamb, but you want to know what I'm going to go back to? I'm going to go back to that quote that Pro Football Talk is running with tonight. Shad Khan believes that in terms of natural talent, this is the most talented roster that he has had in the Jaguars' history, or at the very least his tenure as the owner. And so therefore, I don't see a world in which Trent Baalke is canned midseason. I could be completely off, but this, if only on the surface, this looks like a team that just isn't responding to the voices, both the leaders in the locker room, but also the voices on that coaching staff.
There you go. I think we'll end it there because that was well said and a good argument and good point. And yeah, I don't know what else much there is to say after such a lopsided loss, easily one of the worst in franchise history. So, Mia, thanks for joining. Why don't you tell the people where they can find you this week for more Jags coverage?
Yes, we will be back on Helmets and Heels tomorrow, 12 to 2. Group therapy continues. I'm also going to confirm who Gus will have with him on Duval Rundown tomorrow here momentarily, because we'll see how this goes as far as the aftermath. We'll give it 12 hours, because it's a Monday night game, so it's no longer a 24-hour rule. We're going to give it like 12 hours. 12 hours from now, we will be back here live, Gus, both here for you, Duval Rundown at noon, but then also 12 to 2 p.m., the Superstation, 1010XL's main YouTube channel. And so, yeah, we're going to sort this out. We also have, college football to talk about, because a lot of people in this town neglected the fact that those two teams that Hacker alluded to that are in the gutter both won this weekend. Georgia taking on Alabama, and also the WNBA playoffs are heating up. So on to basketball season, folks. And a special thanks to
here soon enough.
And a special thanks to Injury Care Centers. Your path to recovery starts here. We're going to get them a nice fancy open, and maybe that's what we need, Gus. Once I get that fancy open created tomorrow, then that's when we will see the Jaguars rise from the ashes and get that first win of the season.
That'll get the ship righted for sure. Like Mia said, Duval Rundown will return tomorrow at noon Eastern. So check us out on social channels on 1010XL. Catch Mia all over the place. She does everything for us. And so thanks again to her, for Hacker for joining earlier, and to you guys for hanging out. We will see you next time. Good night, everyone.